and I will also start the recording. So if you want to go back to our meeting later on, you'll be able to do so. So I think most of you are French speakers from what I see in the list of attendees. Maybe I will keep doing it in English in case other people join us, or maybe I can do it in French as well. I don't know what you like best, or if there's somebody who's not French speaking who would rather have me continue in English, can tell me so right now. Of course, vous verrez donc, je vais faire en français, vous verrez donc que vous êtes actuellement en mute sans doute, donc si vous voulez intervenir, vous pouvez enlever le mute pour nous parler. Vous pouvez aussi donc nous indiquer que vous... I see somebody saying English, please. So I will continue in English. Thank you for telling me. So, okay. So some ground rules maybe for the presentation. That's what I was starting to do. You can keep your microphone muted unless you want to say something. And I would suggest not just maybe interrupting or asking a question like this, but using also the functionalities that we have on WebEx in order to signal that you want to say something or you have a question. You have on the right-hand side of the screen, you have a little hand symbol that you can probably see and that you can use to indicate that you would like to ask a question. And then this will show up on our screen too and let us know that you have a question and that we should ask you to say something. Another option, of course, is always to send us through the chat. So you can choose me as the person that you want to send your question to. So you just select host in the chat panel as the person you want to send the message to. And then I can see your question right there. I can see that you want to say something, and I can also unmute you or let you unmute your microphone. So that's the basic idea. And that means that now we can start the session. So as I said, thank you for being here. You probably already know about the Innovative Starters Award. So now it's been a long time. It's been 10 years, in fact, so 10th edition. And we are very happy with all the great projects we've been able to fund in this startup competition. What we do is a bit different from other startup competitions where you usually reward some company for what they've done in the previous year or since they've been funded. This is not what we do. We try to fund the future, so the future R&D of the company and the future development of your company, which means that we choose you not on the basis of what you've done, but on the basis of what you intend to do primarily. So that's what we call your strategic innovation plan. So it's a very global plan that covers all the different aspects of growing your company. It can last up to 36 months, and we expect to see a lot of different aspects in that strategic innovation plan. So it can be, and it has to be, in fact, R&D. So that's really the core of the project because we are the R&D funding agency of the Brussels region. So that means that there needs to be R&D for us to be able to fund your project. But, and that's the main difference with our other programs, we also want to see other types of activities. So it can be some business development, can be things more related to the financial side of the company, the marketing side. So it's not necessarily just the R&D, even though you need to have a strong R&D component to the project. Of course, because we are a public institution, what we want to see is not just some financial returns for your company, but also a positive impact on the Brussels region. And what do we mean by positive impact? Well, it can be job creation. So we're interested in the impact on the economy, and creating jobs of different types can be one such impact. can also be, and it's also something that we're putting much more emphasis on at the moment, can be an environmental impact or a social impact on the Brussels region. So you have different types of impact, not just the economic impact, even though the economic impact is also important. We award up to 500,000 euros per company, and we cover all expenditures up to 500,000 euros. You can, of course, go above 500,000 euros, but in this case, you need to fund the difference yourself, and you need to prove to us that you have enough money or that you will have enough money in order to cover your share of the project as well. Up to 3 companies will be selected to be one of our winners of the Innovative Starters Awards. We say up to 3 companies because there's no obligation that we fund 3 companies. So if it's never happened so far, we only have 2 companies that are, in a way, good enough or that have a strategic innovation plan that is good enough to be funded. We can also limit ourselves to 2 or to even 1 company if there was not enough potential, but I'm sure that there will be potential this year, just like every other year. So, and as I said, so the 500,000 are meant to cover all the expenditures that are necessary in order to undertake this strategic innovation plan. What are our goals with this strategic innovation plan and this funding of your company? Well, as I said, one of the goals is to generate value for the region. We do that in part through helping you grow your business, and that's already an economic impact for the region, but we also do it through helping you make the Brussels region an innovation hub with cutting-edge technological capabilities. So the idea is that we're also there to help you have a vibrant company that will be a shining example in the Brussels innovation ecosystem. And so these are really our 3 goals with this award. You've probably seen there's only a few winners that are showing. I think there's a little bug with WebEx there, so there were supposed to be more winners than this, so we were not only singling out these 4 winners. So when you see the presentation, it'll be online, you'll see that there's more of them, for instance, Colibra. But you can also go on the website, you can see that there's a lot of very well-known names in the Brussels ecosystem that have won the Innovative Starters Award, and more recently, Citizen Lab, VOAir, and Digita that were selected in 2019, and have now just started their strategic innovation plan. So, as I said at the very beginning, we have lots of different funding programs at Innovis, and we have also the Innovative Starters Award. So you might be wondering, what is the difference? Why would the Innovative Starters Award be more appropriate for me than any of the other programs? Well, the idea is that really we want to have plans that are very global in scope. That is, we want to have plans that are broader than simply research and development. And we also want to support this global strategy for a longer period of time than with our other programs, which typically lasts maybe a year, maybe a year and a half. Here, many strategic innovation plans last maybe 2 years, and between 1.5 and 2 years, that's maybe the sweet spot. We expect also strategic innovation plans to include different types of tasks, and that's something that we have always tried to put a lot of emphasis on, because we want to have a clear distinction with all the other programs that are just purely technological. So here you need to have something that is still primarily technological in nature. So we would like to see at least 50% of the program that is devoted to R&D, but we also want you to have all the other types of activities that you can have within this program. And as you can see, there we have a little diagram which shows the different types of activities that we can that you can do in the Innovative Status Award. So it can be research and development, can be protecting intellectual property, it can be starting to think about production. So we're not going to pay you to actually make, I don't know, 1,000 widgets, but you can try to see how you can develop quality control, for instance, or how you can develop the technology that you will need in order to at one point, to be able to scale up your production. We also try to have some activities that are linked to, well, reaching your market. So once again, we won't pay you to do marketing. We won't pay you to have ads online or to do real marketing activities, but everything that has to do with defining and preparing the marketing strategy, this is something that we can fund you to do. So here you have the different activities that you can do. A brief timeline. So you can see we're almost in May. So that means that this is when we'll be starting the call. So everything should be online by tomorrow. Our communications department will be putting all the documents for the 2020 edition online tomorrow. Also, it's not very different from the documents from last year. So if you've already applied or if you've already looked at it last year, you should not be surprised in any way. It's very, very similar. We will keep the call open until 15th July. And then this is when we'll start processing all the files that we've received. And first, we'll look at whether everything is complete, whether you comply with the rules of the Innovative Status Award, which I will talk about in a few seconds. We will also then move on to some pre-selection. There's always two stages to our process, and I'll talk about it in more detail later as well. So first, we'll select internally at Innovis the top 5 or 6 candidates, and then we will send these files to a jury of experts. We'll talk about this a bit later as well. The jury is always around September, let's say mid-September, and then once we've decided on our winners, we start the more administrative process of actually getting the grant approved by the government, which lasts typically until November, early December. We can then have the final decision by the government before the end of the year, and there we can't really give you an exact date because it depends a bit on the workload of the authorities and of the government, and so this is something that's outside of Innovis. So of course we try to give you already some feedback before that, so it takes a bit longer than for some of our other files where we try to be a bit more interactive with you and a bit more well, quicker in telling you whether we'll fund you or not. Here we typically wait until we've gone through the first couple administrative steps. We've already had some validation from outside Innovis, so that there's no real surprise left. And when we tell you that we've decided to recommend that you be funded, you know that it's not likely to change afterwards. So your project can start between the 1st of January 2021 and the 31st of March 2021. They can last for a total of 36 months max. There's no minimum duration. That's a question we often get. But even though there's no minimum duration set in law, it's very rare that we receive projects and that we fund, especially projects that last less than 12 months. So the idea is to have really a strategic plan. Usually it takes a bit of time to actually implement it. And so when you have a project that's less than 12 months, very often the jury tends to find that maybe it's not ambitious enough, or it could be funded in other ways. So it's not a set rule. Could be that there's always an exception that proves it, but 12 months is a bit short. So usually we are between 12 and 36 months, most often between 12 and 24 months, because also 3 years is quite a lot of time, and for a startup, it's probably hard to know where you will be in 3 years' time. So going back to an overview of the different steps in processing your request for funding. So the first thing we do is we check whether you're eligible. If you're not, then it doesn't make sense to process it further. So the eligibility, it has primarily to do with your characteristics. So the Innovative Status Award is granted within the framework of EU law. And there's quite a lot of rules that the EU has set for that kind of funding. So namely, what you need to be is you need to be an unlisted, so not on the stock market, small enterprise, registered for less than 5 years, which has not taken over the activity of another enterprise, has not yet distributed a profit, and has not been formed through a merger. So it's a lot of different conditions, which basically boil down to you need to be a young, innovative company in a way, which used to be one of the ways that we called this program before. So you cannot be a large company, because then we probably don't need it. What we want to do is fund startups. You cannot be too old, because else you're not really in this startup phase that we want to cover. And also, we need to avoid the problems that there might be if you could just, well, create a new subsidiary, or just take over the activity of some other company and start over and have just been registered, but in fact the activity has been ongoing for 10 years, which would also defeat the purpose of the action. So all these rules have to do with the fact that you have to be a new company, or relatively new company, so less than 5 years. So you need to also be a company, which is quite logical. What we mean by that is that you need to have been created by the submission deadline. So 15 July, you need to submit your application file, and on that day, we need to know that there is an actual company that already exists, that has been duly registered. You cannot submit a request for funding and tell us that the company will be created in September or in August, or will be created once we know that we can get funding. We need to know that the legal structure already exists. So that's the latest that you can create it. So you should create it maybe 14th July at the latest, so that you can prove to us that it has actually been registered and everything. And that's something that we also check online all the time. The earliest that it can have been created is the 1st of January 2016, because you need to have been registered for less than 5 years. And we don't know the exact date when the grant will actually be approved by the government. And so we chose the 1st of January because it's the simplest date that we're sure that it has to be approved before the end of the year 2020, which means that if we take this date, we're sure that you're under 5 years. So it can be on or after the 1st of January 2016. So if you were founded on the 1st of January 2016, you're fine. You should prove also that you're an innovative enterprise. That's also something that unfortunately, in a way, comes from EU rules. You will see that you have to either find an expert, an external expert, somebody independent from the company, that says that you will indeed develop new or substantially improved products, so that what you're doing is innovative. So that's not too hard to do. You can just find people from a university or somebody from a research center that can just look at the kind of thing that you want to do and give us a certification. Not something big, it's just a letter that says, I've looked at their activities and indeed they will be developing new and essentially improved products, processes, or services. That's one way you can do it. Or you can also just use your R&D costs. So you can take your accounting books and you can prove to us in a way that your R&D costs are at least 10% of your total operating costs in at least one of the 3 last years. So you can choose one or the other depending on what you find easiest and fastest to do. The important thing to know about this is that it's a bit of a formal step that we need to go through because the EU has imposed it, but afterwards we don't really use it in our evaluation. So the idea is not that if you find an expert that says it's innovative and is the greatest thing ever, this is something that will have weight when we decide to evaluate your project. This we do internally and with our own external experts at the jury stage, and so it's just purely formal. We need to have some document from an expert that certifies this, but it's not something that is used in the evaluation of your project afterwards. So what you need also to have is offices in Brussels, and this needs also to be where the strategic innovation plan will be undertaken, because we're here to fund. Okay, I see that I have a question. Somebody asking, who do you call an expert? So an expert, we don't have a clear definition. We don't have a list of experts that you can use. The idea is it's somebody who has experience and expertise in the domain of application of your product or of your service. So we leave it very broad on purpose because we want to leave you as much leeway as possible. So if the good examples that always come to mind are university professors in your specific domain. But it can also be somebody from the industry, somebody, I don't know, you have a strategic innovation plan that has to do with, I'm trying to find an example of an application, fintech, for instance. If you find somebody who's been active in a lot of fintech companies or who's a recognized expert in that domain, you can also ask them. It doesn't have to be academic expertise. It can be a practitioner. It can be, I don't know, if it's something linked to the media. It could be somebody who has a 20-year experience in the field in question. You have lots of options. So you're really free to choose. Like I said, it's more formal than anything. It's just so that you tick the right EU-imposed box rather than something that we really enthusiastically. Can we submit a profile to get validation? Sure. Yeah, you can always you can always ask us for validation. So if you find somebody and you're not sure that the person would be considered an expert, just send us their name, and this we can definitely do. All right, so yeah, so I was saying, so you need to have offices in Brussels. We can only fund companies that are Brussels-based. Doesn't mean your headquarters need to be legally necessarily registered in Brussels. We know that sometimes some companies have their headquarters in another region, but they're actually doing all their work in Brussels and they have a registered place of business also in Brussels. What we will always check and what you need to be aware of is that you need to be able to prove that this is where you actually be doing the work. So what we don't want is to have a company that has an office in Brussels, but in the 2 other regions as well, and then is actually doing most of the work for how should I say, most of the work for the strategic innovation plan in one of the other regions, because again, that would defeat the purpose of funding R&D in Brussels. You can only win the Innovative Status Award once, at least as a company. So if you've won RISE, which was the previous name of Innovative Status Award, or the Innovative Status Awards before, you are not eligible. or rather I should say, if your company won one of these two prizes, you are not eligible. Of course, there's nothing that prevents you from deciding to have a new startup and reapplying with this new startup for something completely different. So again, the same rules that we had there about not taking over the activity of an enterprise, being really a new company, will apply, and we'll always have a look to make sure that it's not a kind of subsidiary, it's not just some group that you're creating that actually reuses what you developed before. Okay, what is an ISA laureate? That's just the winner of the Innovative Starters Award. So maybe that was not the best way of naming them, but yeah, so that's the idea. The idea is you cannot have won it before. Okay, so also you should not, and that's very, very important. So this one you should listen very carefully. You should not be in financial difficulty according to EU law. So there is a rule also that the EU has imposed that says that we cannot fund a company that is in financial difficulty, and it has a very specific definition. So you might be thinking, well, we're investing a lot, we're spending a lot, but that's normal, so we're not in financial difficulty because we're not going to be bankrupt soon. But that's not what the EU has in mind when they talk about financial difficulty. What they have in mind is something maybe simpler, but also sometimes a bit more, well, less accurate maybe, is just taking a ratio between your own funds and your subscribed shared capital. So you take the code, if I remember correctly, it's the code 100, I think, in the balance sheet, and then the code 1015, and you, no, it's the 1015 and 100. So you take the code 1015 and then the code 100, and you do a ratio between the two, and you check whether your own funds are at least half of your subscribed share capital. So if you have more questions about that, more details, you can always talk to us later, and it's also explained, I think, in the guidelines that we've put online, where you have a link to the actual EU text that also explains this. But that's very important, because that's one of the reasons why we might have to reject your application, and it's also something that has to be fulfilled by the submission deadline. So it's not possible to ask us for some extra time in order to fix a problem like financial difficulty. So sometimes there are ways to fix it. So you could do some operations on your capital in order to fix the problem. If it looks like you might be in financial difficulty, I would invite you to contact us so that you can discuss it with us, and we can see what is maybe possible in order for you not to have this problem. But everything needs to be done by the submission deadline of 15 July. And by everything, we mean everything, including, what was I going to say? Mean everything, including going to the notary public if you need to, if you need to have some official documents drawn up and signed. This needs to have been done, and this needs to be submitted along with your submission. Doesn't necessarily have to be published in the Gazette, but if you well, everything legal needs to have been done already. So I see another question: at which date, on basis of which docs, the financial difficulty assessed? So our basic assessment is to take the published accounts of your company, which are publicly available and which are in our database as well, and to already check there whether you are in financial difficulty or not. And then, in addition, to use all the documents that you've submitted in your application that might show that the situation has changed for the better or for the worse. So if you have annual accounts that have not yet been published but are already available, you can submit them in your application so that we have an up-to-date picture of your company. If you have a way to show to us that although in the previous annual accounts you are in financial difficulty, but the situation has now changed because you raised some extra money or because you have had any kind of other change in your company, then you can also submit them in order to show us that the latest published information is not an accurate reflection of the current state of your company. So the date, the bit on which so how should I put it? So what we're doing is we are judging you based on the latest available information, which you should submit to us in order to provide us with an accurate picture of your company. And if you have more questions about this, maybe you can keep them until the very end, because one of my colleagues is also more specialized in the financial side of all the applications and will be able to answer you as well. Okay, and also that's obvious, you need to have submitted a complete application, including, not including anything, so in electronic copy, and that's something new compared to previous years. It's electronic copy only, so you don't need to print and submit a big file like maybe you've done in previous years. Now we've gone fully paperless for this program, for most of our other programs, I think. So just submit an electronic copy via email. The email address is listed on the submission form, so you will find it there. It has to arrive by the 15th of July at 4 p.m. So we decided to do end of business 15 July. We get to the next page. Okay. So once you've gone through this pre-selection, it sounds very daunting, but it's actually not that complicated. You can see it's just ticking some boxes. Once you've gone through this, and most of you will go through this because it's not that hard, you will arrive at the pre-selection stage, which is also done in-house at Innovis. And there we finally using some substantial criteria and not just ticking boxes. And these are the same criteria that we will be using for the final evaluation at the jury stage. So there, of course, we don't meet you yet. The idea is to select the most promising files on the basis of the written application, and then to have a limited selection of applications that can move on to the next stage. We aim for 5 to 6 applications, which is what is possible to evaluate afterwards in one day, because usually we organized our jury over the course of a single day. So there's really 3 main aspects to this preselection. First, the technological aspect. We want to make sure that what you do is innovative. So it shouldn't be something that everybody is doing the exact same way. We're not looking for the 10th startup that is doing exactly the same thing that 10 other startups are doing already really well. We're trying to find something that's a bit disruptive and that brings something new to the market. We also want something that has, let's say, technological challenges. So the two are linked in a way. So we want something new in terms of philosophy or application. I want also something that is technologically challenging. So if something has not really been done before or not done in exactly the same way before, there's probably some technological aspects that also need to be clarified and that also need to go through some R&D process. So that's a very important criterion for us, because we want something that is technologically challenging, that has some technological uncertainty, something that you need to figure out that's not obvious to someone who is skilled in your domain. We look at the skills of the team as well. So because what you're going to be doing is risky and new and uncertain, we want to make sure that there's the right people in order to do that. So if you say that you're going to do a lot of machine learning, would like to see some people with a machine learning data scientist profile on your team and in the budget. If you need some very specific skills, we want to make sure that they are there and that it's not something that might jeopardize the success of the project. You need to describe what you will do in a bit more detail. So we need to see whether what you want to do is realistic and whether it makes sense in terms of the overarching goal that you want to accomplish. So we need to see that what you intend to do is actually likely to get you where you want to go. There's also the financial and the commercial aspects. That means that we look at the financial health of the company. So here it's a bit broader than just the financial difficulties. So there we really look at the numbers in detail, and we really have a real analysis of your company and its current state. We also look at your business plan and your global strategy. So do you have a strategy, a go-to-market strategy that makes sense? Is it relevant when compared to what you said you wanted to do technologically? Do the two go in a way hand in hand together? And have you done all your homework when it comes to identifying the market, identifying competitors, finding a strategy, finding your let's say your specificities compared to the other competitors, etc., etc. We want to look at your financial plan as well to see if the financial plan is also reasonable. And then we want to have a look at the impact on the Brussels region, which should actually be in bold as well. So I think it's shown a bit differently than it should be. So the idea there is what well, we talked before in terms of economic impact and other kinds of impacts as well. So we have the transversal aspect finally. So this is something that is a bit specific to the Innovative Starters Award. So we always have some specificities to the program. So they're the strategic character of the strategic innovation plan. This is what I spoke about at the beginning. This is well, whether you are actually using the specificities of our program. So whether this should not just be a normal R&D project like we usually fund. So whether you have something that is really a global strategy and something that uses all the different types of activities that we can fund. So if you have only R&D in your project, you will score lower on that particular aspect. The formal quality of the application, if your file is clear, if we understand it easily, if we can see really what you're trying to do without having 100 questions because things are not described properly or there's paragraphs missing and that kind of stuff, well, it's better, of course, and so we would rank you higher on the formal quality of the application as well. Finally, we have the jury in September. So they'll use the same criteria that we've just seen, and we'll have experts from different fields and from different institutions that will come in order to evaluate your project and in order to discuss your project with you. So typically there are people from Innovis, so we're there mostly to in a way chair the meeting and to let all the experts give their opinion. We have people from other regional institutions, in particular from Finance Brussels, to look a bit more at the financial side as well. And then we have external experts. They can be business angels, they can be technical experts in a particular domain, they can be startup coaches, they can be academic experts. So we try to vary and we try to have a good mix and a good balance between the different types of experts on the jury. You will come to Innovis hopefully, if everything goes well, we won't be relying on video conference by then, but we never know. So you have a short presentation physically or virtually, followed by a Q&A session with the experts, and then your project will be assessed using the criteria that I just shown. And then you go on to the admin part if you've been selected. Now, maybe you've already looked at the application document from last year, and maybe you've seen that it's a form that can look quite long when you open it like this. That's because there's a lot of explanation. So we try to make it as user-friendly as possible, and to try to explain in each section what we really expect. So you can really follow the instructions as carefully as you can. If we request something, it's typically because we need it and it's useful for us to assess your file. So try to give us everything that we ask for, and try also to see what we're not asking for in order not to have a file that's maybe 200 pages, which is maybe interesting but has a lot of information dispersed all over the file. So try to be synthetic but also as complete as you can be. And you'll see that there's a few different sections that I will quickly go through so that we can give you a few tips and we can clarify a few things. So the first section, this is, let me go back. The first section, the summary of the application, is not really something we need to cover here because it's really just explaining to us what you will do in a few words. The thing to keep in mind there is that there's always a summary that is meant to be public. So just look carefully in the the document where it says that there's a description of the project that can be used on a website, because then you know that there is where you should not put anything very confidential that nobody should know about, because else we'll be putting it in a press release or on a website. So just make sure that you see where you can put confidential stuff and where is the only section where there's something that can be public. But of course, the rest of the data we do not give to anyone. So the first important or substantial section is section B, which has all the info about your company. What we want you to do is make sure to list all your shareholders, where we ask you to list the shareholders, so that we can see, especially if other companies own some of your shares, whether you're eligible. Why is that? Because if you have other companies that own some of your shares, or if it might be that you're not a small company anymore. If they are big companies themselves and they own too much of your shares, it might be a problem. So this is something that we need to check, and so make sure that you give us a complete overview of your shareholding structure. Give us also enough background about your company, so who the founders are, what are the activities, what are the products, who are your main customers, because we want to see how you will go from where you are today to where you want to be. And to be able to do that, we need to have a clear picture of where you are today. So give us all the information that we need in this summary of the company so that we can see how it relates to the strategic innovation plan that you will talk about later. Your financial data, very important too. As we said, financial health is crucial for the pre-selection and also for the eligibility. Give us your financial statement for the last 3 years and any provisional statement that is available. And make sure that it is the balance sheet that you use internally and that includes your turnover. So very often, the published version of your financial statement, they do not have the turnover of your company because it's not data that is mandatory to publish. But us, we want to have the complete picture, and so we would like to have the version with the turnover so that we can see really what state your company is in. And then sometimes we ask you to provide further explanation when something does not speak for itself. This is, for instance, if you decide to prove that you're a young, innovative company using the fact that you've spent 10% on R&D. So you might just write two numbers and say, okay, this proves that I have spent 10%. The problem is we need to check that it's actually true that you spend this 10% on R&D. So we need to have some real data that allows us to see how you computed that. So if it can be seen in your financial statements, then tell us, okay, because of this code there and this one, you can see that we spent 10% on R&D. If that's not possible to do like this, you can always also ask an auditor. So you ask an external accountant to certify that, in fact, you've spent based on maybe some more detailed listing of what you've actually been spending, what in a way was the raw data that went into creating your financial statements, that you've actually spent 10% at least on R&D in the past 3 years, or in one of the past 3 years. So this, the most important section now, the one about the strategic innovation plan. This is where you explain to us what you want to do and why you want to do it. So you will tell us a bit more about the context of the strategic innovation plan. So are you facing specific challenges now that mean that your current approach will not work if you want to scale up? Are there things that you really need to do in order to find new business opportunities, to find a new market? What will actually allow you to tackle all these challenges? This is what we want to know in order to see where you come from. What is the problem that you're facing at the moment and that justifies investing 500,000 euros of public money in this case, but still that's a huge investment regardless of who is footing the bill, to show us really that there's a real problem that needs to be fixed, something that you need to do for your business to be successful. You show us then that you actually have a coherent global plan that will allow you to address this challenge and to take your company to the next level. So it can be, for instance, that you've realized that you need to develop a whole new line of products in order to find a new market, and that you need a lot of R&D and a lot of pre-marketing activities in order to do that. It can also be all the other types of activities that will be made necessary because you decide to scale up in a way. So maybe right now you are 5 people, maybe you say, okay, I need to develop a whole new line of business, and that will take me to maybe 25 or 30 people. Well, maybe there's some HR organizational things that also need to be put in place in order to manage this growth. So that's also something that can be envisioned, definitely. You can also have a template that we give you for the work packages. It's very important that you follow this template. So I know it can be a bit frustrating sometimes because you have an idea of your habits, you know how to present things, and maybe you have a specific project management philosophy that you use that you find hard to fit in a particular template and so on and so forth. But we've developed this template because it allows us to have the same kind of information in a way from all the different companies and to have exactly the information that we need. What we need to do is we need to know what you will do, which technological challenges you will encounter and will try to solve, and what you will get at the end of the program. So these are really the 3 key elements for us when we look at what you want to do. Because if any of them is unclear, then it's a problem for us if we need to fund it, because that means either we don't really know how our money will be spent, or we don't really know that it would be a good idea for the region to spend it, that there's really a need by a company to have this money to do something that's technologically challenging, or we don't know at the end what we'll actually get for the money that was invested in a way in your project. And so be very careful about how you do this. And the most important thing to remember is that we want you to be precise. Just remember that it will be a jury of experts that will be evaluating your project. So for instance, if you have a data science project, we always try to have an academic expert that specializes in machine learning and in research on machine learning or AI. And so we will have people who want to know really what was going to be going on from a technical perspective and who are able to tell whether something is challenging or not. So don't tell us that you will use machine learning to do this and leave it at that. Explain in more details what exactly you will be doing, using what techniques, using what data, where will you get this data? Do you already have it? Do you still need to collect it? Are you sure you're going to get it? Do you know the quality of the data? All the things that really are necessary in order to assess whether your project is viable and whether your project is challenging enough. So I know that there's quite a few, well, hot technologies or buzzwords that sometimes people want to put in their applications, but try to really be specific and not just tell us we're going to use this broad technique, but just tell us precisely what will be done. For the budget, same thing, follow the template. You can see there's different categories. If you're in doubt, do contact us. It's easier, especially for a strategic innovation plan, where it's not as iterative as the other kind of programs. It's easier for us to give you information directly about what is and what isn't eligible in terms of the different categories that you find in the budget, rather than have to do recalculations afterwards on our own, because we cannot really contact you about this while we are evaluating your project. And if there are so many things that are ineligible in the budget, it might also be a problem during the evaluation. So that's definitely questions that we can answer about the budget. Also, we need to look at the commercial perspectives of your project. And so we have a section that is devoted to market study and valorization. So there, what you will be doing is telling us how you determine that your strategic innovation plan is commercially viable and has potential. So why will it be good for the company? Why will it be good also for the region? So what did you do your homework in a way before? So you're going to submit a business plan and a financial plan, and you're going to explain to us how they were constructed. That's something very important, because the most important part of it is not necessarily the numbers, but how you got to these numbers. So we want to know what went on in the construction of this business plan. So give us your hypothesis, give us your assumptions, so that we can examine them and we can challenge you on them as well. So the idea there is really to show us, so from that financial side or commercial side, but also to show us why it will be good for the Brussels region. So we'll have some environmental impact, we'll have a social impact, will it create jobs, etc., etc. If you see that, well, if you're planning a lot of growth in terms of sales and in terms of employees, it's good also to explain to us how you will manage this growth. So if you are in a, I don't know, in some small shared desk space somewhere, and you say that you want to hire 30 people by 2022, well, it's good to see that you have a plan to actually be able to do so and to move, and that you'll be able to manage in this way this growth. you have the HR processes that are needed to manage it. A typical example that I can give is if you tell us, okay, so in the first 6 months of the project, we will hire 10 people to do this and this and that, and these are very specialized people, and we have no idea how we're gonna be doing this, but we're confident that we'll find them. This is something that creates a major risk in a way for us when we want to fund you. We want to see that you have all the HR processes in place and that you thought about, well, the different things that you need to do in order to make your business plan, your financial plan, and your strategic innovation plan work adequately. Okay, so what happens then after you win? Well, we'll sign the grant agreement probably around December 2020. You will then submit a short report every 6 months. Every time you submit a short report, we'll try to meet you in order to have a short demo of the results. So our idea is not to burden you with long reports to write. You'll see that a template for reports, it's for the most scientific technological report, it's about a page, 1.5 pages probably. The template, of course, you fill it in a bit, but when it's full, it's maybe 5 pages max, not much more than this. And what we're really interested in is having a broad overview of the project. Then for things that are more specific, we have the demo, and then we can ask you some follow-up questions to have the answers to the questions we might still have. 3 years after the end of the project, you'll still hear from us because we'll receive a bit of an ex post form also to fill in to tell us how your company grew after getting the strategic innovation, the Innovative Status Award. And also, one thing to keep in mind is that you can never receive another subsidy to undertake the same task. So if you receive a grant to do a specific set of things, you cannot go to another institution in the region to ask for money for the exact same thing. So that means if you receive another subsidy of any kind, you should inform us so that we can check that there was no double dipping of this type. One question that is sometimes asked by companies is, what if you want to do something completely different? You already have a strategic innovation plan, but then you realize that there's something else that would be interesting to do, and you would like to get some money from Innovis again while you're also doing the strategic innovation plan. So the short answer is that there's no legal rule that would bar doing so, but we are very careful that we try to be careful and not to give you 2 grants if you cannot do the 2 simultaneously. So this depends a lot on your company, I think, on how established it is, on the manpower that you have within your company as well. So it's a bit more on a case-by-case basis, but we take, let's say, a very hard look at what you want to do to make sure that, one, there's no overlap, that it's not something that you should have in a way included in your strategic innovation plan, but you decided not to do it. So it has to be something very distinct, like almost like another line of business in a way, or a very different type of program. And as a general rule, you will typically not get a regular R&D project at the same time as Innovative Status Awards project. Maybe it might be a bit easier for some other programs like, what's it called? Like the programs that are more of an academic nature. So for instance, if you want to have a PhD student to do some things in the doctorate program, maybe that's a possibility, and it's other people like Innovis who are managing it. But regardless of the program, we'll always be looking at the 2 programs together to see, is there an overlap, and is it something that should have been included in the strategic innovation plan and was not, and so it makes sense to actually fund it. And I've now reached the end of, I see. So if this, I see a question. So if the strategic innovation plan includes validation activities that can only be performed in specific conditions that are not available in Brussels, for instance, mountains, can these activities still be funded in this program? Yes, of course. So when we say it has to be done in Brussels, it doesn't mean that 100% of things has to be done in Brussels, even when it's impossible. The idea is that the bulk of the work and the company itself, in a way, should be primarily in Brussels and should be doing the work primarily in Brussels. If you need to go somewhere else, or if you need to have, I would say, a bit of subcontracting work done elsewhere, that's a possibility. It just has to remain reasonable. And that's also a bit on a case-by-case basis. We can't tell you in advance what is acceptable or not, because it really depends on the philosophy behind it. If the most challenging things are done elsewhere and or by a subcontractor, then we will have a problem. If it's something more peripheral, something for which you need some very specific expertise that is only available outside, then it's not a problem and you're free to do it. The goal for us is that you be able to undertake your project in the best way possible. So if that means getting things done elsewhere, a reasonable amount of things done elsewhere, then it's fine by us. Okay, so now I've reached the end of my presentation. As you can see, I've put 2 other contact people for this for the Innovis Center Awards, because my 2 colleagues will be taking over from me as I leave Innovis and start a new job. And so you can contact them if you have any further questions. Now, we are still all here available for you. So if you have any questions now, either that are mostly relevant for you or for the other attendees as well, you may, of course, contact us right now and unmute your microphone and let us know of any particular remark that you might have. Okay, so I think then we can stop it here. So I don't know if my colleagues have anything to add or anything to say that I have not covered.
Not especially, just saying hello to everyone. Maybe just indeed introducing myself a little bit. So my name is François Villen. I will be in charge with ICO, as you see, of this program in the future. It won't be too much of a mystery for me because I was in charge of it in the previous year before Damien took it over already. So normally, if you still have answers after the 1st of May, after Damien has left Innovis, feel free to contact me and ICO, and we will answer them, of course.
Okay, perfect.
Yes, and same for me. So I am Aiko Grespert, and I am a scientific advisor. So I am in charge of the scientific part of the project. So I am.
All right, perfect. Then I think we can end. I see. No, so it's not French or Dutch speaking. So they're both in charge of the action, and they're both French speaking, but they also understand Dutch and can reply in Dutch if you have questions that are in Dutch. So yeah, it's not about language in this case. All right. Okay, so I see somebody asking us also in which language the proposal has to be written. So you can write it in French, Dutch, or English. And there's a form in each one of these languages. So you choose a language that you're most comfortable in. I would say if it's all the same to you, the easiest sometimes is English, because that means that it's easier when we have to find experts, because that means we can find Dutch-speaking experts or French-speaking experts. Of course, you're free to choose the language that you are most comfortable with. All right. Any other questions from anyone? If I don't see anything else, then I think we'll leave it at this. And if any other questions should come to mind, don't hesitate to contact my colleagues who will be helping you. One thing to note, though, is that we don't answer questions that go into the details of your proposal. So we will not tell you it's a good idea or it's a bad idea. This is the kind of project that we will fund or not fund. We typically limit ourselves to very broad things in a way about the program, or to clarifying the rules. So what we can do is tell you whether, as a general rule, that kind of expenditure is eligible or not, but we won't tell you that using this machine learning technique is a good idea or not, and we won't tell you also whether you've described it in sufficient detail at this stage, because we don't pre-analyze the different submissions. It's a competition, so we try to maintain a level playing field. So we won't give you any specific feedback on your project. It will just be about making sure that you understand the rules correctly. Okay, perfect. Then we're basically done, and the recording will be put on the website as well for you to go back to. All right, thank you very much, everyone, and hope you have a good afternoon then.